Hello, you beautiful degenerates, and welcome to Links and Locks, the Action Network's golf betting podcast presented by Bet365. I'm your host, Roberto Arguello, and this is your 2024 Rocket Mortgage Classic betting preview alongside Spencer Aguiar and Nick Bretwish, whom you can find on Twitter at TOffSports and at SticksFix. You can find me on Twitter at RobertoA213. Of course, it's now called X. But we've got your tournament betting preview for the Rocket Mortgage Classic from Detroit Golf Club. I won't be giving any picks this show because I'll be covering it as a host for PGA Tour Live this week. So no bets for me. But Nick and Spencer are going to break down their entire betting cards, their course previews. But first, let's start with best bets. Spencer, what's your best bet for the Rocket Mortgage Classic?
I have two matchups this week that I like a lot. I'm going to go with Carson Young over Ben Silverman. I got that at minus 120. That number has moved a few points before we could record, but anything minus 130 or lower is still very playable inside of my model.
All right. You're backing one of the best mustaches on the PGA Tour in Carson Young against the Canadian Ben Silverman. Nick, who are you betting on for your best bet this week?
I'm going Andrew Novak top 40, where ties pay in full at plus 125.
All right, Andrew Novak, top 40 plus 125. Nick's back to his bread and butter with the top 40 play. Obviously, not really an option for the 72-man fields that we've seen in the signature events, but we're back. Nick's been on a heck of a run. He's had seconds in the last four tournaments. I don't know how that happens.
Heck of a negative run, but my God, how close can you be? Can we just jump right into that real quick? I mean, Tom Kim makes that putt on 18, and I was like, all right. I don't think Scotty gets shaken by anything, but it's like everything is pointing in Tom Kim's direction here. Hounds the driver as the leadoff man in the playoff hole. I think he's got Scotty by 25 to 30 yards, and obviously Scotty clubs down to 3-wood. And I think what Scotty did there was manage the course. He knew that he'd have a full pitching wedge in, something that he could, control the spin of as well. And Tom Kim just rips it down the fairway. And I think the TV said he hit a lob wedge.
Yeah.
So he was trying to I'm assuming his lob wedge is probably like a 58 or a 60, somewhere in that range, and trying to full swing that from, I think he was like 115 to 120. That's a really tough shot. Obviously he trusts it, and he's a hell of a ball striker in the PGA Tour. I just think that Scotty kind of showed the veteran savviness there of, I'm going to hit the middle of the green, and and obviously it was very close to the pin too. So frustrating, man. It's been a tough run, but I did think made the most money in our one and done last week. So I'll look on the bright side there. What I lost in real money, I made up with fake money in our one and done contest. So that's good.
It's kind of been like the nature of the business, I guess, when you look at it too, because I've had 3 second place finishes in 4 events. I did not have Tom Kim with you last week, Nick. I also gave out from my best bet an Adam Scott over Will Zalatoris first round play. Zalatoris makes 8 birdies in round 1, continues the next 3 days to combine to only make 7. Adam Scott beats him 3 of the 4 rounds. And, it's one of those things where I think if you're to power rank like matchup markets, the full tournament bets are always going to be the best. I think the round 2 and 3 plays would probably be second and third. I've always been a proponent that the worst matchup to take on is usually the round 1 matchups, just because sometimes you can get these fluky results that come into play there. And if you can take them on in round 1, there's usually a market to take them on for the full event. But it's been tough with some of these matchups. Like Zalatoris was the prime example of that last week. The market has been so skewed against him in every single capacity to try to oppose him in a lot of these spots. And unfortunately, when that ends up happening and you can't find a pre-tournament matchup and then you land in that round 1 matchup, like, it is what it is. I think there has been a little bit of run bad from us on the show. As I said, that's sports betting at the end of the day. You're going to have ebbs and flows, and all you can do is trust your numbers. But, still been a profitable year for the most part across the board in a lot of these markets. And being able to have a 156-man field once again this week really does help to get back to where I think all of our bread and butters would be for golf betting.
Another week where I didn't hit the outright. Closest call was Akshay Bhatia, but thankfully best bet on the show last week was Bhatia top 10. While everybody was freaking out about the protesters and all the paint on the green, there was a putt for par for Akshay Bhatia that he needed to make to finish in a tie for fifth, which stayed in the top 10 without a chop. With if he had missed it, he would have tied for ninth and gotten chopped. And so I was very nervous on that 5-foot putt. He made it, cashed the top 10 and the top 20. No first round leader, no outright winner, but still a profitable week. It seems like that's been the theme. Best bet's been hitting on my side, but not the outrights recently. No bets for me this week, but guys, back to our best bets for this week. Spencer, you like Carson Young over Ben Silverman. Why are you trying to take on the Canadian?
My model has actively backed Ben Silverman in a lot of spots this season. He was my best bet at the Mexico Open when he landed 13th. There have been a few other situations recently where he's graded as one of the best values that I've had on the board inside my model. Although I think it's that exact reason of him shifting into one of the worst values on this slate that explains why I like this head-to-head wager as much as I did when it opened on Monday. There are particular golfers for me weekly that I know I'm almost always going to be lower on than consensus. I talked about Will Zalatoris. That has been for the past 3 or 4 months, every single tournament. I would say Taylor Moore has transformed into that sort of a play. I have an Eric Van Rooyen wager that I'll talk about later in the show where my model seems to always be lower on him. But those are names where I typically want more of a significant edge since the market has really started to move in that direction of wanting to take on those players to begin with. All three are fade candidates weekly, but we rarely get these matchups that are included in the space where I can pit a fringe top 50 golfer, which would be Carson Young for me, against a name that landed outside of my top 100. There is a chance that this goes miscut versus miscut. I always want to preface this on the show because, as I say for these matchups, and as we get to the bottom of the board in a lot of these things, it's always going to be the fade candidate over the player that I'm going to want to back in a spot. Like, there's a lot that my model likes about Carson Young when comparing him to the section of the board of where he's at, but it really comes down to the Silverman profile. He ranked outside of the top 130 of this field in my model when I combine distance, short iron play, and putting into one category. He also failed to crack the top 100 for easy scoring production, Donald Ross history, weighted strokes gained total, projected scoring, and weighted ball striking. That's almost across the board, landing outside of the top 100 in all the main categories that I'm looking at this week. As I said, it still takes some semblance of an opponent that I'm willing to target since I'm not going to fade Silverman against just another low-end option blindly that I don't want to actually have exposure to. But we rarely get these battles where there's going to be somebody outside of the top 100. And then you look at Carson Young, who landed 42nd for me in my sheet, inside of the top 50 of all iterations of my market. I thought this was a very soft price, and I believe we get that soft price here just because of this, we'll call it a boom or bust nature with Silverman that's come into play recently. But my model in this particular spot, and it's what I keep going back to, has been very locked in on spots where it's wanted to play him where he's performed and positions where it's wanted to fade him where he's miscut. So I like where my model is trending looking at plays against Silverman. So I'm going to oppose him here in a battle against Carson Young.
All right. So the fade of Silverman is on this week for Spencer. Nick, why are you backing Andrew Novak in the top 40 market at plus money?
Overall, just ball striking and the field strength. I know he's missed the cut the last 2 times here. I believe he missed a cut by 2 strokes last year. But everything that I pull, obviously, it's a little bit of a hit or miss type of golfer. You know, he's really lost his form in early May there with those strokes gained approach and strokes gained ball striking overall. But that came back to life at the RBC Canadian. I feel like the time off has probably helped these guys, especially guys that are fighting for, you know, their PGA Tour future, getting into the FedEx Cup, all that good stuff. So it's been the best year of his career in terms of like overall placements. We have multiple top 10s this season. It kind of checks every single box for me. The wedge play from 50 to 100, the longer iron play from 200 plus that I've been looking at here. And overall, like for me, it's like 2 different profiles of golfers. I want guys that can kind of bomb a guy, just like, you know, we saw Bryson do back in, I think, 2020, the COVID year. And those guys that do miss fairways have to have elite short games, in my opinion, to get inside the top 10, top 5, and obviously win this tournament. And then those that can just are overall really good at total driving. Everything that I've seen from Andrew Novak off the tee looks like he is long and accurate, which is great. And again, the iron play ceiling that we've seen this year and overall floor, I think is plenty to get inside the top 40 on this field. I had this number right at like even money plus 105. So I'm reaching a little bit with only 20 to 25 points of value, but with the ties paid in full, I haven't necessarily been able to equate that, but I would equate that to roughly 15 points. I don't know if Spencer has an actual mathematical number there, but we've tried to figure this out a little bit over the years, but that's what I would say. It's roughly a 15-point edge with the ties in full. So I'll go there.
And you noted that there's been a little bit of time off for Andrew Novak, and like several other, like a lot of players in this field, he hasn't played over the last few weeks. Where, if you'll remember, last 3 weeks on the PGA Tour, signature event in the Memorial Tournament, then a major championship in the US Open, then another signature event with another 70-man field in last week's Travelers Championship. So 156-man field, just do the math. Most of them can't be in the field if there's only 70 players in the field in 2 of those 3 tournaments. And the other one's the US Open, where you've got the Open qualifier. So some of these guys got in through Open qualifying, others got in through other ways, but the majority of them didn't play in at least 2 of those tournaments, and if not even 3, like Novak. And so it's going to be an interesting spot on the schedule where there's a little bit less form to go off of this week compared to other weeks where guys have played consistently over the last month leading into the tournament. So that'll be something to watch this week. Gentlemen, the golf is at Detroit Golf Club this week on the PGA Tour. You guys have noted that it is a Donald Ross design. What are we weighing in our models this week for Detroit Golf Club? Spencer, I'll give you the floor first.
So we have seen an average winning score of 23 under during the opening 5 attempts of this tournament. You get wide open layouts at the property, which Nick has alluded to, has turned mostly into this bomb and gouge mindset, since many of the blockages from trees or methodically placed bunkers can be taken out of play for those with extra length off the tee. We do get a venue that has 4-inch thick rough throughout that's supposed to heighten the challenge, but it's hard to see it accomplish that goal, since it really just adds to the distance narratives for those who can carry the ball further with the driver in hand. We've talked about this. Ross designed the venue in 1914. Many of the quirks implemented then are still relevant today. We know Ross always has complicated runoff areas around the green to add to the difficulty. This is going to be a much more subdued version compared to most of those examples. You're going to get marginal undulation. There are still these several tiers to traverse on the greens, although the medium-sized green complexes are not quite the same test that players got a few weeks ago at Pinehurst. It's always very difficult for these tournaments because I don't want to call this. I think when you call a tournament a birdie fest, it always signifies a relatively weak tournament where you can't find a realistic edge just because it comes down to that volatile nature of putting. I would say it's a glorified version of that this week, where distance and short iron play will amplify upside totals at this very straightforward track. When we talk about the putter, golfers have rendered nearly a 5% increase in dispersion of scoring with the flat stick. That means we see a venue that emphasizes distance, like I talked about, and putting at its core. But there is that approach nature for this venue. Just under a 10% uptick in shots have come from 0 to 150 yards. That includes a 17% mark overall from 0 to 100. That total is going to be about as high as any course that you'll see on tour yearly. I do think all of those answers probably take away some of the advantage from building a model. You're going to see from a DFS perspective, people are going to land in a lot of the same spots just because it's that 3-pronged approach here where it's distance, short iron play, putting. Everybody's going to continue to build this in the same capacity. For a DFS answer, there's a lot of ways to get unique and different, and it doesn't mean that all the chalk plays are bad plays. A lot of them are the best plays on the board. There are going to be opportunities, though, to find leverage in those spots. And for the betting market, which is what we're primarily talking about here, I'm trying to find individual mistakes that were made on players, whether that's the golfers that I want to back, which is a Nikolai Højgaard, which I'll get to in a second, or any of these names that I'm much lower on than consensus, whether that's an Eric Van Rooyen. I talked about Ben Silverman. I mean, that's not necessarily the same example there because he's the bottom of the board, but it's kind of just finding these market errors for an event like this and finding the players that I'm higher or lower on than consensus.
Nick, anything you'd like to add? Anything you're weighing in your model that hasn't come up yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think Spencer nailed it on the head. I think this was the hardest week for me to actually try to like push a model. I think it's overall like it's a ball striker's course with a hot putter. Um, and yeah, it looked like we haven't seen. I guess Ricky isn't really a long hitter, so he was one of the more accurate players, but he got it up and down around the green so damn well. So I think for like the guys that I'm interested in, either are fairway finders with great around the green and ball striking overall, or just bomb and gouge guys that can get it up around the green. So I think maybe a little bit more around the green for me if they are a little bit erratic. But other than that, it's going to be who gets out with the putter. Unfortunately, I do think this is that birdie fest that putting is going to change a lot of. So I will weigh that very heavily. It looks like the field loves Maverick McNeely, and I was looking at guys like Aaron Rye, and then when I was looking at 33-1, I was like, I just probably can't push that button when we're going to have to rely on the flat stick a lot. So it's interesting. I think it's on the DFS side, an event I will like a lot, but on the betting side, I do have a full card. I don't know. There's not much short bets on my card, so I'm interested to see where we land, and I am interested to see a lot of these guys that haven't played in a while.
I do think that there's a lot of these, we'll call them mid-tier players, maybe on the high-end answer of that with the Maverick McNeelys and the Aaron Rise and all those names where the market acted very swiftly. Aaron Rye opened at 40-1 and immediately, for the most part, got pushed down 10-ish points. You look at the same answer that's given with Taylor Pendrith. That's a name that I have on my card this week, but it's one of those, I don't want to say it's a gross tournament, but because I do happen to kind of like this board for the most part, but you do have these situations where there are numbers where my model thought there was value on certain players, but I thought the market did a decent job, even though we don't have a ton of hold percentage on this board compared to some of these other weeks. It's definitely on the lower end, and maybe that's just the removal of Scotty that books felt a little bit more freedom to price this in a better nature, and that's why we have a little bit more potential here on the outright market. But I mean, you're with a lot of these names at Maverick McNeely 30, Aaron Rye 35, 40, Taylor Pendrith in the 40 range. Like, I like all of these plays. It's just you can't play everybody, and you have to pick and choose your decisions here.
I thought it was interesting that last year, among the top few players on the leaderboard, you might remember that Colin Morikawa and Adam Hadwin went into a playoff where Fowler defeated them on the first hole by making birdie. There are different avenues to getting into that playoff. Ricky Fowler was second in the field in strokes gained approach. Adam Hadwin actually lost strokes off the tee, but had one of the most hot putters that week. He finished second in strokes gained putting. And Taylor Moore tied for fourth, 3 shots behind the trio that made the playoff at 24 under. He lost strokes for the week on approach, but he had the hottest putter in the field, gained nearly 10 strokes for the week with his putter. So you can cover up some mistakes with the putter on this golf course. They are bent grass and POA putting surfaces, which is the same as last week. Second time on tour, we've had that exact surface. And with bent grass being around the greens, is with bent grass being on the greens, and then I believe it's Kentucky bluegrass rough, it's not as penal as like a Bermuda where it really gives the professionals trouble. We'll also note that there's been some rain in the Detroit area recently, so it's going to play relatively soft. It was raining throughout the final round last year. They weren't sure that they were going to finish it, but expect softer conditions, scoring conditions. Really, I thought one thing that wasn't talked about a ton was at the U.S. Open between 2014, the last time they played it, and now 2024, the putting surfaces changed from bent grass to Bermuda, which made it a lot more challenging around the green, where you can't just Martin Keimer it and putt it everywhere because you got more grain, and that makes it more challenging. But this week, there is no Bermuda on the golf course, so don't have to worry about that. I think that makes it a little bit easier. And as we said, soft scoring conditions. Spencer, you noted that Taylor Pendrith is one of the golfers on your outright betting card. We do not have to worry about Scotty Schefflering us this week. So without further ado, Spencer, who is on your outright betting card this week?
The first ticket that I punched was on Minwoo Lee at 22-1. You can still shop around and find 21-1 if you're proactive in your search. There was no player in this field that had a higher ceiling projection for me than Lee. My model ranked him second for distance plus proximity plus putting. Roberto, you just talked about this. There is not one way to get this done. And I agree. And that's why anybody that's looking only for distance golfers, I think this is how you get caught in the Cameron Champ trap that ends up occurring because you're just trying to find guys to hit the ball far. That's not all of what this is. It's a portion of my model that's going to be important, but if you have two of those three areas where you can excel, I think you can compete in this tournament. And if you can find a way to be top end, top notch in one or two of those areas, that's how you win this event. So Min Woo popped in that territory for me. He also graded second for weighted strokes gained total. I understand the market initially felt some trepidation for a golfer who doesn't have a top 20 on his resume over the past 8 tournaments. But I also thought the initial opening price that we got discounted his 5 consecutive top 26 finishes. Just one of those positions where my model's always going to land with someone being a value when they're 20-1 or higher, when they grade as the top upside performer in my model. I took Nikolai Højgaard at 66-1. That was my largest exposure wager of the week. I bet him to win just under 10 units. For the sake of comparison with everyone else, we're right in the range of roughly 7 units. When I built my model to start the season, I envisioned a very different year than what we've gotten so far in 2024. So if we exclude this early season production where he had top 10 showings at the Dubai Desert Classic, he followed that up at the Farmers Insurance Open, where in fairness, I think I ended up having him that week. I ended up betting him in tournament there. I liked him pre-event at 50-1 too. Very well could have and probably should have won that event over Pavon. Things didn't end up going right. But since that moment, he's yet to have a top 15 finish in 12 starts. That includes 4 missed cuts and an additional 4 finishes landing 50th or worse. I know none of that necessarily paints the best picture here for a golfer that entering the season, like Højgaard and Min Woo were the two names that I was expecting to really transform themselves into formidable top 20, 25 sort of players with realistic win equity any week that they've played. And we haven't necessarily gotten that from either one, but the statistical perspective from Højgaard here was super intriguing. My model ranked him first in this field when you combine that distance, proximity, and putting that I keep talking about. It also found an upside for him to use his length off the tee to overcome some of the recent questionable returns with the driver. He had the most top end results from a data-driven portion of my model. He landed inside of the top 3 in 5 of the 7 categories I weighed. That is an astronomical return for a golfer that opened at 66-1 here. Anything that you're going to get in the market, like even the 50s and the low end at some of these books, I'm going to have value there just because of the upside that I had in Højgaard inside of my model here. You get this distance enhanced golfer with the weighted proximity requirements, who also, by the way, has positive trajectory with his putter on similar green complexes. I know what the floor is. I surely understand that with what we've seen recently. I just thought this was a really good number grab if you are trying to shoot for upside there. Talked about Taylor Pendrith. 40-1 is what I got him at. The best you can find now is 30-1. He's generated 7 top 33 finishes over his past 8 starts. That includes a victory, 4 additional top 25 finishes. A lot of that has been putter heavy in its nature, but there wasn't a golfer in my model who graded better on easy scoring courses or recent strokes gained total than him. And then I closed out my card. We've talked about numbers moving, whether you want to view it positively or negatively. I mean, there's closing line value in all those tickets, but here's one that's gone in the opposite direction. I took Taylor Montgomery at 100-1. You can find that at 175-1 now. I don't know where he's at with his game. He's withdrawn at the Valero Texas Open. Same thing happened at the Byron Nelson during his past 2 starts. However, I believe that's why we're getting this enhanced total to consider here. For a golfer, if he entered this week with form and known health, he is the prototypical fit that we're talking about that you'd want to see at this course. He has just enough distance. He's one of the best putters in the world. And while all of the expected approach play that you get from him on a weekly basis will always have problems, where he has his most upside comes from these shorter ranges here. So you add all of that together when you're looking at those 3 answers. There was only one golfer in this field that graded above him from a course-specific outlook there. That's the Højgaard discussion I kept having. So the floor is going to be another potential withdrawal. I'm okay taking on the unknown there when you get a price like this. And it's honestly one of those situations where it's fingers crossed that he's able to return back to where he was. I mean, a season ago would be the best when we were getting the best results from him. But even if we can just return this to positive health, this is a very nice course specific fit for him. So it's a blind wager in the sense that I don't know where he's at. I do think, though, if he had any form, this is probably a 50-1 ticket.
I remember
was close on Montgomery. Sorry, yeah, I was like, feel like the layoff for him. Well, he hasn't played since first week of May, and that's when he withdrew again too. So it's like, there's no way it can hurt. I mean, especially if the number's 175. What do you got to lose?
Yeah.
Taylor Montgomery had his best week on approach at the Sony Open in Hawaii, second week of the season. Obviously, didn't play at the Century, and I used him for one and done at the American Express, and I was broadcasting that tournament, so I wasn't betting it, but I would have bet him had I not been broadcasting it. And since then, it's been pretty rough for him. He hasn't gained strokes off the tee since the Sony Open, and on approach, it's been pretty rough since the Phoenix Open. It just screams that he's an injured golfer and that he's got to get healthy. He's a long guy off the tee, got the unusual swing where he's not even looking at the ball when he makes contact with it. And he's got to figure something out right now. Withdrew from the PGA Championship, as I think you mentioned, Spencer, as well. So he just hasn't played. If he plays, definitely somebody to keep an eye out for this week, and could be a valuable player because, like the American Express, it bombs away off the tee, and if you can roll the rock, watch out. He could be a Taylor Moore candidate to just go nuclear on the greens with his quirky little self-painted white putter. But he can roll the rock with the best of them on the PGA Tour. He might have been number one in strokes gained putting last year on the PGA Tour. I can double check that. But
he's number one in my projected model for putting. And I think Nick said it best. If this was a situation where he had pulled out of a tournament 2 weeks ago and then was forced to withdraw again last week, I'd be much less inclined to want to jump into this position. But it's that out of sight, out of mind over the past, month plus, where I don't necessarily know where he's at with his health. And that there's a detrimental quality about that, because he could pull out of the event, but when it's already baked into this price because the market doesn't know what to do with him, it's a extremely, and I want to stress the word extremely, low floor sort of a play here, because at the very worst of what happens is he hits a ball on Thursday or hits a couple balls on Thursday and he doesn't make it through the day. That's the worst case scenario that can happen. The best case scenario is he's fully healthy and ready to go, and you get a golfer that got boosted in price. So I like that we haven't seen him in quite a bit of time. I'm going to bet on the potential here that he's returning to health, but there is no safety in this bet whatsoever.
His last two rounds on the PGA Tour,
an 80 and
an 81.
An 81, yeah.
But he has upside if he's healthy. I think this is the right way to bet him if you're going to bet him. Don't bet him in the top 40 market. Don't do that.
Yeah, shoot it as far up the board as you can, whether it's an outright or a top 5 or a 10. Like, you don't want to play him in safety markets. He's a target that's completely off the board in matchups. He's not worth the bet as a top 40. This is the boom or bust, all or nothing approach.
Any thoughts on him from a DFS perspective?
I like him right now. I see him at 2% in my model, and maybe Nick can give me a different number for what he has. That number's trended up a little bit over the past 24 hours. When I built my model on Monday, he was sub 1%. And there's enough people out there that are probably willing to take a chance just on name recognition and the price tag here that he probably closes. Nick, you can tell me what you think. I think he probably closes somewhere between 3 and 5%.
I'll take the under all day.
Okay,
yeah, well, then, I don't think he'll cross 2.
Well, then even better based off of that answer. Then, like, I think there's a way to get exponentially overweight on him while still, only being at, like, if he's 2%, I mean, I'll take 5 times weight. Oh, I mean, I'll take him at like 10% there. I think there's a withdrawal potential, so I don't necessarily want to go full send, but I mean, somewhere between 10-15%, I'm fine with that.
Nick, you mentioned you have a full card this week. Who you got in your outright betting market.
All right, here we go. So our buddies at Bet365 laid a good number. I love Keith Mitchell. Surprised Spencer didn't really mention his name at 40-1 for a ball striker who is getting hotter with the putter. I want to say the bent grass has been his friend, at least on the putting side of things. I know that's going to be
It has been in my model
with Keith Mitchell. So similar to kind of what we were doing with Jaeger early on when he started to move to bent grass. I feel like that's when we were attacking him, and his ball striking's coming back too. So I was interested in him. At the top of the board, I did have room for someone in the 20s, and I looked at Minwoo hard. I just don't believe in the iron play as much as I do this guy. The issue here is Akshay has played 8 times in a row. This would make tournament number 9. I think Tom Kim's going on 9 or 10 too.
Yeah.
I'll probably fade Tom Kim in DFS just because I'm hurt after what happened last week, and that had to be a big mental grind. I think he's young. He can continue to just play golf like Akshay probably. I don't think I'm worried about the 8 in a row. So you guys, if you got any thoughts on that, let me know. I took a bomb at 500-1. Just kind of been keeping my eye on this guy. He went to University of Illinois, has a ton of birdies per round on bent grass greens, and kind of lights it up even when he was on the Corn Ferry Tour. Anywhere in the Midwest, this guy has a ton of game. His stroke gain data is not going to look that great because it's a low sample size, but Adrian Dumont de Chessart, I took him to win at 500-1. That is I guess the greatest outcome for me personally. If he wins, that'd be fantastic. I went back to Alex Noren 35-1, Andrew Novak 125-1, and Taylor Pendrith was the last ticket I had room for at 30-1. I was looking at Aaron Rai, but then, like I said earlier, it's kind of like, why would I take a guy that can't make a putt? Aaron Rai is more like a top 10 upside play, I guess, and that's probably his ceiling. So, yeah, when I was looking at like Steven Yeager, was close, but the numbers kind of moved against me. Davis Thompson, I think the number's a little too short. As much as I love that guy, I think his swing and his game has a long way to get, or will be on the PGA Tour for a long time. But I went with Taylor Pendrith. I think his game's in a great spot, and that's a guy that if I'm backing a putter, I'm fine with backing him. And yeah, that is it on the outright market. So thoughts on Pendrith? I don't really need to hear much on Novak. I'm probably lighting money on fire betting him. Dumont, I'm okay. It's just 500-1. I'll damn near bet anybody at 500-1. And then Noren and Akshay. I don't think anybody's talking me off Keith Mitchell. I think that'll be a lot. But
So I want to touch on the Keith Mitchell discussion. You mentioned it, Nick, with when we look at putting here. So 85th in my model over a 2-year perspective in strokes gained putting. You put him on comp courses with similar green complexes. He jumped to 36th overall for me. I ended up weighing it a little bit differently in my model where his weighted putting ended up being 53rd, but I feel like we have wagered on him so many times on the show, and it's been the same outcome almost every single situation. He demolishes in a good way the ball striking where he's top 5 or 10 in the tournament. And there's always these bad little go-arounds with the around the green and the putter where he ends up losing like 8 to 10 strokes and misses the cut. My model really liked Keith Mitchell. I didn't get there just because I felt like it was one of those situations where my model has seen and played this song and dance before, and I always am left in the corner just like by myself with it, and it never goes well. But model liked him a lot. I'm probably going to be out on Alex Noren. I don't know. I mean, I feel like he may have missed his window to actually win an event right now. I could be wrong on that. He's a top 15 player in my model. It's just, I don't know. True. Like, I don't know what a fair price is. Like, to me, it's higher than the numbers that are out there.
Probably. Same with DFS too. He's in the 10,000s. Like, what are we doing? Why is he more expensive than Akshay, Pendrith, and Jaeger?
Well, that's part of the problem is like my model prefers all 3 of those guys over him. And a similar answer ends up coming into play even in the betting market there, which is why I'm lower than consensus on him. Akshay is what he is. He's a top 10 player in my model. I think he's fine for the most part. Not going to have an outright ticket on him, but understand the play around him. The ball striking you have to love for a course like this. And then who's the other name I'm missing?
Pendrith.
I have the Pendrith ticket. So yeah, I like, yeah, Pendrith is, I think, one of the better plays on the board.
I like the Adrian Dumont de Chessart bomb. He's somebody who
Yeah, how do you say his name before one of us gets
Dumont
it'll
de
probably be
Chassard.
Spencer. That's
I'm
why that's
I'm
the
just not
only
gonna
reason.
say his name. Like,
That's
I
why I
mean,
didn't ask for your thoughts on that one. I was like, I'm setting you up for failure in a strongly worded email from corporate if you even try to say his name.
But yeah, AGDC was awesome last year on the Corn Ferry Tour and had a bunch of top 10 finishes. Just looking at the start of, or actually, let's take it back a second. He wasn't even on the Corn Ferry Tour for the whole season because 13 months ago, he was still in college at Illinois. So
Yep.
he's a really young player. So there's upside there. He's just 24 years old. In his first event on the Corn Ferry Tour after the national championships, he went out and won the BMW Charity Pro-Am. And then after that, tied for second, T8, T6, T7, T10. His first 7 starts on the Corn Ferry Tour, or sorry, first 6 starts on the Corn Ferry Tour are all top 10s. And then kind of struggled after that, only one top 15 finish through the rest of the season in his next 5 starts, and hasn't really had it on the PGA Tour. One top 10 came in an opposite field event at the Puerto Rico Open. Obviously, no data there, so it's a little bit frustrating. His other top 25 finish also came at an opposite field event in Punta Cana, where again, there's no data. So wish we could have seen some of that. He is pretty long, but other than that, it's been a down year for him. But I like the upside play. Somebody's going to win this week, and the top of the board isn't that concerning. You've got Tom Kim at 14-ish to 1 as the betting favorite, and it's not Scotty Scheffler. So we can all breathe a sigh of relief there. I think Dumont Chassard could be somebody worth playing some type of ladder at small risk, because he's got this upside and he showed that he's a streaky player, and he hasn't played recently. Last start came at the Canadian Open at the beginning of June. So he's had a little bit of time off, and maybe he's found something in the time off. I think it's an interesting play this week. I'm very intrigued to see how this week.
I pushed that one a little irresponsibly, but I win like 150 units if you win. So it'd be I'm getting sick of the second place finish, so maybe that guy can make it happen for me and make the next 3 years profitable just by being alive.
3 made cuts in a row, 2 of those inside the top 30. Like, I know you've mentioned, Roberto, that we haven't seen him in a handful of weeks at this moment, but before he got a little bit of time off, he was trending in a positive direction, which you take those 3 finishes and you exclude the Puerto Rico tournament. Those are his 3 best finishes that you can find on his resume. So clearly he's been finding something over the past, we'll call it 2 months of action.
Yeah, and I like these bets on the young players. ADDC, baby.
I like that.
Akshay Bhatia is younger than him by 2 years. Crazy. So is Tom Kim. Love Bhatia. I heard there was a quote. I've been trying to search for it to actually like find it in print. I haven't seen it, but I saw one of our writers, Derek Farnsworth, noted that Sahith Theegala said at, I think it was the PGA or the US Open, that Akshay Bhatia is going to win multiple major championships, and that caught my eye. I'm intrigued to hear that, and people note that he's got big time game. So I'm very in on Akshay Bhatia, and obviously after he cashed the top 10 and top 20 last week, the first round leader bet. I only bet one first round leader last week, and Bhatia made it a fun sweat throughout the day. But Tom Kim got us at the end, unfortunately. Gentlemen, let's talk one and done. Speaking of Tom Kim, Nick had him last week. He was the big winner in our pool because nobody picked Scotty Scheffler. Nobody has him left, I don't think. So $2 million for Nick. I was one of a few people who had somebody tie for 5th. I wish I chose Bhatia, but I ended up choosing Patrick Cantlay. There was no doubt I was going to pick Cantlay the whole time. He got 500, or he got like 700 grand. So Nick and I are in a virtual tie for second. I think I'm like 50 grand ahead of Nick. So that's basically nothing. The next signature event will definitely shake things up big time, or the next high purse event, which will be the Open. So Nick and I are a couple million behind our leader, Michael Leboff. He has Tom Kim available, so I'm not going to choose Tom Kim. I'm assuming that Leboff's going to choose Tom Kim, and I went with Taylor Pendrith. Love the history here. Love what you guys have noted about his putter being a great putter. He also, I think, a similar course as far as what's needed to succeed is AT&T Byron Nelson. or sorry, the CJ Cup Byron Nelson now, and he won that last month in May. I think there's a very similar recipe for success. Bomb it off the tee and give yourself chances to roll in birdie putts. So I've locked in Taylor Pendrith. I'd consider moving it to Davis Thompson, but I think the fit here is just too good for Pendrith. So I'm leaning over him strongly over Davis Thompson.
Roberto, outside of me making a lot of cuts here, there's been very little to talk about in this contest. I'm going to take some credit here. I took Justin Thomas last week, and that was also a tied for fifth with you. Like, that's probably the most money that I've earned in a contest in the entire season, weeks. I don't know where we're at this point, but I'm playing a different game, as I note every single event. I believe I'm tied right now for first for most cuts made, and don't really think I have any chance to win this contest. So I'm going to play it safe. The funny answer is, I don't know how we've landed in this position, because I note this almost every single tournament. My player pool got really thin on me fast, and there's a lot of players that I wish I would have had for particular moments that vanished on me. And probably the only person in the entire world that has used Minwoo Lee. I played Minwoo Lee at the US Open, and so now I don't even have Minwoo Lee available here, and that would have been my choice. I might just play this safe and go either the Aaron Rai or Tom Kim route and not really care about where I'm at. To me, it's one of these positions where if you're actually trying to come from behind here and win a contest, and you're going to try to get different, Minwoo Lee's going to have some popularity to him. I think Minwoo, I think Nikolai Højgaard makes a lot of sense. You just have to know what you're signing up for with him. If you're trying to play things safe, the safe routes with it are the Tom Kims, the Aaron Rais, the Maverick McNeelys. I'm going to go with Taylor Pendrith. I do believe he probably has a little bit more volatility than those other names, but those are the four options that likely garnered the most ownership, in my opinion, but they make a lot of sense for why people are going to play them. So at the end of the day, it just comes down to, are you front running a contest where you're trying to protect the score? Are you trying to get a made cash like I am, or are you actually shooting for upside to win the event? Because if you're doing that, you might have to deviate depending on the size of your contest.
Yeah, once again, we're in a small contest, only 15 people, so we can be a little bit more chalky, especially near the top of the board. Spencer, I also wanted to note, because I don't think I noted it, I think I spoke to you about it before the show, but Nikolai Højgaard entering the Mexico Open at Vidanta earlier this season was second on the odds board, opened at 19-1 at Bet365 and closed at 17-1 behind only Tony Finau, who, by the way, should have won that event had he figured out how to putt. Awesome to see him putt well last week, by the way. Højgaard is somebody who made the Ryder Cup team last year and was being talked about in the same type of sentences as Ludwig Oberg. And now look at where they are. There's some potential there for Højgaard, and he's got as much upside as anybody in this field, I believe. So I think he's a really interesting play throughout all facets of the market this week. Nick, who are you going to play in one and done this week?
Leaning Minwoo Lee, because I'll likely be fading him in the outright market. I'll probably play him in DFS, but there's him or Akshay. I feel like I still need a big splash, so I'm leaning Minwoo Lee. And I think Spencer's take on him early on pushed me in that direction. Akshay playing so many times in a row worries me. I don't know why, but it does. But Minwoo Lee, only other guy, like I'd play Keith Mitchell if I had him. I don't have him available. I don't know when I did play him. Is there a way to find out when?
Yes, I can tell you when you played him.
Yeah, so let me know when I played him. I think that would be my main advisement this week. If I didn't burn him early, and I'm sure.
You played Keith Mitchell at the Cognizant Classic in the Palm Beaches, and he finished in 9th place for you. Got 210 grand. So
okay, I'll take that. Yeah.
Especially on a Florida golf course. I think I missed basically the cut every week in Florida this year.
Yeah, I like him the most, especially on bent grass. So he'd be my number one play. I don't have him, so I'm gonna go with Minwoo for the upside and try to get first place.
If we've learned anything about this contest, it's the player that I don't have available that I wish I could actually play is the one that seems to be winning every single tournament. So that would be Minwoo. So I don't know. I like your spot that you're in, Nick.
All right. Picks have been saved, and I'm Xing out of that window so I can't tinker. Thank you, boys.
All right, gentlemen. Any other plays on your betting card this week? I'll sling it back to you, Nick.
Yeah, so I did actually, when you said the ladder thing on ADDC, now we could actually say that without butchering the name. I did ride that. I guess the highest exposure I have is 3-1 in the top 40 market where Ty's paid in full. Mentioned Andrew Novak, and then you mentioned this guy too, and you got the hat on where he's from. I love Mac Miser. I've been talking about him for a while. I truly believe in his game. I don't know if this is a great course setup for him, but I did get a ticket at plus 930 for him to finish in the top 10 where Ty's paid in full. I thought that was outrageous and a misprice earlier this morning. So I'm going to ride that one with the upside because I think that's a guy that like he's either going to be lights out. I don't think he's going to be like a middle of the packer. He's a miscut or going to be someone that's, in one of the final tee times on Sunday.
I like the Mac Meissner play. T5 at the Charles Schwab for his best performance of his rookie year on the PGA Tour. Younger guy at just 25 years old on the PGA Tour. And
just hits it a ton.
What's that?
Just hits it a ton, and he's got a good short game. So I feel like that, like the short game part was kind of like what led me into doing this, just because I am weighing that pretty heavily. But again, whatever we get with the putter is probably what makes or breaks him and most people on our betting card this week.
I think he's a cheaper version of Davis Thompson.
Yep, that's a good comp.
Solid golfer all around. If he puts the pieces together, can definitely do it. Isn't necessarily elite at any one thing, but he's very solid. And in this field, definitely could pop.
Yeah, and I think both those guys kind of are the makeup of what Ricky Fowler was in 2023. Obviously, Ricky's got pedigree and closing value and what he's done in his career, but like stats-wise, if you kind of look at those guys and model them out, like they're all right there. Davis being a little further off the tee than the rest, but yeah.
We'll talk Ricky Fowler in a moment, but I want to get Spencer. Any other plays on your betting card this week, Spencer?
Yeah, I have a couple. All these tickets have already been punched. I'll explain why I like them in a second. Nick, you can try to talk anybody out of this if you have a differing opinion. I don't love the limited data that we have in this situation. If we also want to talk about players that could maybe not be trending in the right direction, this is a golfer that missed the cut during the Korn Ferry event that he has recently played, but this is a number grab. I took Jacob Bridgman for a top 40 at plus 225. Any thoughts on that one, Nick?
I like Bridgman.
I thought it was a good number grab above anything else.
Yeah, and I want to say, where did I write him down? He was on one of my recommendations. Oh, the one question I had to remind me before we go. Yeah, I think Bridgman's just, my issue with him is lack of fairways. Sure. But he's relatively long enough that the short game, I think, can carry him, if he's bounding gouging. So I do like him a little bit. It's a good price.
Very good price on that. I thought that was one of the better prices on the board in the placement market. Yep. And then the other matchup that I have is I took Ryan Fox minus 115 over Eric Van Rooyen. If we're talking a DFS answer here, and I'll merge this into the betting part of it, but I didn't have a player priced in the $7,000 range or higher that graded as a lower value for me inside of my model than Van Rooyen. There are certain portions of the statistical profile that show some semblance of upside if you are looking for a target that can climb up the board. But as is the case with all of these matchups, I'm always trying to find miscut equity. That was something that Van Rooyen gave me at a much higher rate than any of his counterparts. 119th in his career at Donald Ross courses, back-to-back miscuts at Detroit Golf Club. Maybe the easier scoring potential can carry him to greater heights for a day or two. And that's where this has some, I don't want to even say issues, but you get into the weekend and all of a sudden Ryan Fox doesn't make the weekend. And that's how a bet loses where Eric Van Rooyen ends up coming 47th and, never really competes on the board. But I thought Fox was one of the better leverage plays for DFS. I really liked his profile. He was inside of the top 15 for me from an overall rank. So while it's always going to be the fade candidate that I'm looking on, Fox didn't give me any reason to not want to go in his direction. So took Ryan Fox out minus 115 over Van Rooyen, and that's the extent of my card right now.
Ryan Fox been playing some great golf this year. Best putting year of his career by far. His prior best was last year, and he's getting twice as many strokes per round putting this season. So not his best on approach, but when he has hit the ball well with his irons, he's done well. Top 7, tie for 7th at the Canadian Open, was in contention there for a long time. T4 in Myrtle Beach, and also T4 in the 2-man event, the Zurich Classic of New Orleans. And all those results have come in his last 8 starts. So trending in the right direction. The putter's been really hot. I like the upside for Ryan Fox. Would not shock me at all for the big Kiwi to get the win at 37 and a half years old this week. I think the bridge and play is a really sharp one too. Awesome putter and has done pretty well on these scoreable courses on the PGA Tour. So also younger golfer who has upside that may not be tapped into, not yet in his prime. So I think that's a great play. I think it's a really sharp one. Let's talk Ricky Fowler. Let's get through the board since we've gone through all of our bets. Thoughts on Ricky Fowler, our defending champion this week?
You want to start, Nick?
I tried. I don't know. What is he doing well? Like, he scored last week because he just rained putts, which I guess, we've talked about that being an asset this week. But I don't know. He was in such good form coming into this event last year, and I just don't see it. I'd rather give me Davis Johnson and so give me. I probably wouldn't take that. I don't know. Too much name value in the pricing.
Here's my thoughts on Ricky Fowler. So there was a portion of Monday, and I'm going to answer this I think for betting, the problem is that kind of like Nick said, there's too much name recognition that comes into play. Negative leverage for upside in my model. That's not necessarily what you want to see. When we look for DFS, and Nick, you can tell me where you have him projected ownership wise. He was a golfer on Monday that there was virtually no ownership around him, like whatsoever. And he's been a steady climber for me inside of my model to the point now where he's a neutral value when you're looking for leverage and a negative value for the price tag. So I kind of planned on wanting to play him when I thought he was going to be 3% owned. And you can tell me where you have him, Nick.
I got him at 9 to 10. So yeah,
that's exactly where I have him
unplayable
trending
for me.
Yeah, it's exactly where I have him trending also. And that's not what I envisioned when this week started yesterday. So at that ownership percentage, you're not even getting any of the leverage that you thought you were getting in that position. It's probably a fair ownership. It's just not going to be for me at that. Like, I think there are better routes for DFS where I can find, and maybe that's a name that would be further down the board where you can actually save money, but there's like other potential routes that give you very similar upside at ownership that's not going to be too dissimilar.
Ricky Fowler, per Data Golf's true strokes gained data, is having his worst season in terms of true strokes gained total since 2008. And I'll say ever, because in 2008, he only had 3 starts on the PGA Tour. So super small sample size, wasn't really on the tour. I'm going to throw that out. He's losing 0.15 shots per round this year. It's been pretty poor. It's looked like 2021 and 2022 version of Ricky Fowler statistically, whereas last year looked like prime Ricky Fowler, where the approach play was awesome and the putter was awesome. And it just simply hasn't been like that. But hey, you get a guy who can absolutely roll the rock on greens that he's comfortable on a very scoreable golf course, and who knows what can happen. But I definitely wouldn't be playing him at the prices given throughout the market.
Here's my biggest problem. And once again, I'll go back to the DFS board. If you look at, let's say, Ricky Fowler's $9,000 on sites out there. If you look at a golfer like Doug Gim, who's 6,900, my model prefers Doug Gim in a head-to-head matchup over Ricky Fowler at $2,100 less and half the ownership. Like, that alone signifies that I can't use him in a build. It's just, you can have players that are too cheap, and I can think Doug Gim is too cheap, but that to me, if you take the name recognition out of it, and Gim should be higher priced than he is in fairness, that's more of a player that he should be right next to on the odds board. Like, I have them one spot after the next where Gim is minus 101 in my model over Ricky Fowler. So, it's just very difficult to get to Ricky at the ownership percentage.
Gentlemen, let's go through the betting board and talk about some golfers this week. We talked about Tom Kim very briefly. Cameron Young, we haven't mentioned him on the show so far. 17-1, second shortest odds outright on Bet365, coming off the 59 on Saturday. Who knows if there was a cut at the Travelers Championship, if he would have even gotten to play on Saturday. But he did. Shoots a 59, remarkable. Stubbed the chip on 18, but knocked in the 10-footer. I thought it was going to miss low, but he knocked it in. What a round. It's still awesome. Don't let The men yelling at clouds tell you that the 59s don't mean anything anymore because of the Corn Ferry Tour. It's the PGA Tour, hasn't happened in 4 years. If it didn't matter, it would happen recently if it was that easy. Nobody's done it this year. It was awesome. Do we have any faith in Cameron Young? Are there any markets that you'd be intrigued to play him more than others?
DFS probably for me only.
I mean, the problem is, I think there's going to be a lot of ownership around him. The outright number we have found this just to completely sink from where we're at. Like, this is a golfer, and I've noted this on the show. You all of a sudden get monikers attached to you where you become Scam Young and nobody wants to play you. And now, after one good finish, after he's done nothing for the entire last 2 or 3 months, he gives you one result that is really propelled by a 59, which you talked about, Roberto, that he very well may not have been playing the weekend in a normal situation there. And I understand he still produced that, and he started Sunday very hot and worked himself up the leaderboard, but he's a top 10 player in my model. He's 7th for me in projected win equity. The problem is in most of these books, he's going to be the second name on the board, whether that's DFS or betting. I'd rather play Minwoo Lee than him. I'd rather play Akshay Bhatia than him, probably. Like, that's more of the section, though, like where I don't know how I can get to him in really any capacity. Don't dislike him, just I feel very hesitant about him this week.
Tom Kim or Cam Young?
Tom, like, for $300 more on DFS, I would rather get to Tom Kim. I see Cam Young at 20% ownership. We're not even getting any leverage based off of that answer. The distance and the short iron proximity, incredible. Like, this is the type of venue that if he's ever going to win at, this is the type of event that you would expect him to win. There are some negative marks for him in my model, though. I know he's a birdie maker, but when you throw him on easy scoring courses, he sometimes doesn't become a birdie maker. So, I don't know. As I said, he's 7th for me in projected win equity as a golfer that's going off as the second name on the board. That to me is the biggest red flag in the problem that I have. It's not that he is some glaring error to where he has no projected win equity. And if he goes and he beats me here. I just can't get there when you're going to be the second name on the board and you're not inside of the top 6 of my model.
We talked about Minwoo Lee and Akshay Bhatia, but Jaeger and McNeely. Jaeger's 27-1, McNeely's 30-1. If you had to have an outright ticket on either one of those guys, Nick, which one would you pick?
I'm going to surprise the folks. I'm actually going to go with Maverick McNeely. I do like him. I think for the little bit longer price, give me Maverick, and how much we're talking about putting. I think this is actually a really good course for him. He's had great course history here too when his game's been in form. His game is back in form. I got nothing wrong to say about Maverick McNeely.
I mean, I guess this will be a surprising answer for me also, because I seem to have become the Steven Yeager guy on this show. I'm going to say Maverick McNeely. I thought Aaron Ryan, Maverick McNeely were the 2 options, and maybe Davis Thompson. I'll throw him into the mix too. Like, they were the 3 options to where at a different number, I would have been very intrigued to try to get exposure to them. I thought each one of those 3 ended up being a little bit too short, but look, if any of those 3 go out and win this golf tournament, I'm not going to be shocked.
If it's going to be a putting contest this week, I'd much rather have Maverick McNeely than Steven Yeager. Spencer, you hit on Steven Yeager at the Houston Open. His putter was super hot that week. Since then, he's played in 8 tournaments. He's lost strokes putting in 7 of those 8. However, the one that he did gain in that span, he gained over 4 strokes putting for the tournament. So you never know what you're going to get with Steven Yeager's putter, but it's probably not going to be great. Whereas Maverick McNeely's putter just about always is an asset. And he was 3rd here in strokes gained putting in 2020 when DeChambeau won in Detroit.
Yeager had positive trajectory for me with his putter in the Houston event. And that's one of the reasons why I ended up punching the outright ticket on him. You look specifically here, and this is my biggest concern. He's 76th in my model over a 2-year duration. Similar comp courses with similar greens. He's 143rd. If he's 143rd with the putter, all the ball striking metrics are going to look incredible. if you could give me a 76th place projection with the putter, he probably would have landed inside the top 6 or 7 of my model. But without that, he's a name that just missed the top 10 and he moved in the wrong direction for upside. It's at the end of the day, it's a birdie fest to where you're going to have to make putts. And I'm not so sure for 4 days. If we're talking to actually win this event, we can have other discussions about him for why I think his ball striking makes him a safer target to consider. But if we're talking about actually winning the event, you're going to have to make putts for 4 days. And I don't know if I trust him to do that.
Who do you guys think is the best golfer whom you guarantee will not win this week?
Oh boy.
Let me look.
Could look bad next week, but who do you guys think it is?
Gotta take a stand. I will go the best golfer. Like you're saying, he can finish second, or just overall like pedigree and just no chance he wins.
Either way.
I'm gonna go with Cam Young.
Oh, second on the odds board. Okay, that's spicy.
I will go with Alex Noren.
Messed up, man.
Norton 32-1. We talked about Aaron Rai a little bit, mentioned Davis Thompson, mentioned Keith Mitchell. Will Zalatoris is 45-1. Adam Svensson is 55-1. Bobby Mack, fresh off of his Canadian Open win, is 45-1. If you had to punch a ticket in the outright market on Zalatoris, McIntyre, or Svensson, which one would you take, Nick?
I don't know. Maybe Zalatoris can hit lightning in a bottle again like he did round 1 last week. I'll go with him. I do like McIntyre. I think what he's changed with that, he's doing that like arm pinned to his ribs and putting with that back arm. I actually do that. It doesn't help my putting, but obviously he's a better putter than I am. I'm very close to seeing McIntyre, but I'll still take Zalatoris with the market dates this week. And I've been kind of saying it all week, like or all year. He's been broken. His distance is gone right now. Swings changed. Damn it, I'm going with McIntyre.
I don't want either 3 of these names. Like this is, if you want to talk about players in my model that, we're talking about who cannot win.
Mm-hmm.
The very easy answers for me in my model would have been Zalatoris and McIntyre if we start pushing this a little bit further down the board on it. I guess I'm going to say the most likely winner of that group, which is the opposite answer that I've given on this show over the past 6 months, is probably Zalatoris. Like there is a potential that he returns back. I don't even want to say to where he was at, but maybe like he has a higher ceiling than the other 2 names, in my opinion. But I mean, this is me just grabbing a pedigreed golfer who at one part of his career before the back injury was a legitimate top 10 caliber golfer on tour. So I'd rather bet on that profile that he returns in a field that is for the most part very weak. There's not a lot of top end talent in this. So I'll go with Zalatoris, but I don't feel necessarily comfortable with any of the names.
I agree with your sentiments on Zalatoris. He definitely has the most upside. I just don't trust him to put it together. I don't know that he's healthy. The iron play has not been consistent. The ball speed on the driver, driving distance has fallen off. It's a big red flag for me right now. We discussed this last week, so I'm not going to talk about it further. But Svensson is a really interesting person for me because this guy gains strokes moderately, not anything crazy, but around the green, off the tee, and on approach basically every week for the last few months. And he just can't putt. But last week at the Travelers, gained strokes putting, gained about 2 strokes for the tournament, ties for 16th. I think that's an encouraging sign. I just don't think there's very much upside with the putter. He hasn't gained a stroke per round with the putter since the Wyndham Championship last year. And so we know that he does have upside. Spencer, you hit on him at the RSM Classic when he gained 3 strokes per round with the putter. I believe that's only over 2 or 3 of the 4 rounds because of the course rotation there. So it's not a full tournament, 3 strokes per round. But if he can put the putter together, there's definitely upside with Adam Svensson. And he hits these absolute lasers where there's as little curve on the golf ball as any other player on the PGA Tour. I think he's a really interesting golfer. But I wouldn't trust his putter or Zalatoris' putter or Zalatoris' wild striking. So I would also go Bobby Mack there.
That's just for the record. If my model was to answer the questions, Svensson would have been the name that my model preferred over all of those options. I just don't. He was a top 25 overall ranker for me, which the other two were not.
There's some other interesting names. 60-1, Taylor Moore. Spencer, I know you really don't like him in your model. It's been a persistent theme, and I think he was really bad last week. Nikolai Højgaard, whom we've talked about, is 60-1. Matt Wallace, somebody, Nick, I know you back before in some of these tournaments. He's a easy course merchant on the PGA Tour. Could be interesting to see how he does this week. Cameron Davis, past winner here, is 60-1. The loan shark, Ben Griffin, played really well at the Canadian Open. Spencer, you had a ticket on him that week, and he was dealing with some eye issues. He had some surgery, and now he's wearing sunglasses full time on the PGA Tour. He got some floaters that he said might be a problem for him persistently. And then Chris Kirk is also 75-1, winner earlier this season at the Century, and then hasn't done a ton recently. And then also Nick Dunlap, winner at the American Express, 85-1. Ricky Fowler's 80-1. If you had to make an outright bet on one of these guys, Matt Wallace 60-1, Cam Davis 60-1, Ben Griffin 70-1, Chris Kirk 75-1, or Nick Dunlap at 85-1. Nick, which one would you like the outright ticket on?
Much as I love Matt Wallace, I do think he's got a lot of win equity, and I was very close there. What was that, CJ Cup or Byron Nelson? What did he finish fourth, fifth? He can make putts. I'm gonna go with him, but I do think this is a decent sneaky course for Nick Dunlap too.
Me too. T4 at the Byron Nelson, by the way. Yes.
But give me Matt Wallace. I believe in this guy's game. If fairways being missed don't necessarily matter here, he's hitting the ball long. Love his short game. I'm gonna go with Matt Wallace, but he lets me down more times than he helps me, just for getting that out there in the airwaves.
Matt Wallace for me was, if we're talking players that are, let's say, over 50-1 on the opener, was the closest name that I had that did not make my card that I really wanted to find a way to get exposure to. And the reason why I didn't is I don't love players that are coming in. He just played over in the Netherlands, and I know that he's expressed how tired he is. He loves this course. This is why he's here. That was enough of a reason for me not to put him on my outright card. I do believe he's a really intriguing first round leader bet that he might be able on day one to keep it going. And then, I don't know what happens after that, but 10th in my model in expected strokes gained total for this course. There is a ton to love about him this week. And there are a handful of names, and we've discussed a lot of these already on the show, where if they were to win, there will be regrets. You can't bet everybody, and they didn't end up making my outright card, but Matt Wallace is right up there with any of those names. As a win equity candidate, he's a top 15 win equity candidate for me in my sheet. And if you ran this for safety, he became a top 10 player. So I like Wallace quite a bit.
Didn't realize he had gone all the way across the world last week, but that's going to be a heck of a travel trip. Hopefully it works out for him. Gentlemen, fun show. Where can we find your work this week, Nick?
The Best Bets article at Action Network, and then potentially Spencer and I doing a podcast for Better Golf Pod. I've just been traveling so much for work, so I apologize for any of the listeners out there. I greatly appreciate your support. And then potentially doing another underdog draft as well on Twitter this week to end out June. So at StixPicks on Twitter, STIXPICKS.
All right. Top 40 market is back. Nick's back. Great to have you this week, Nick. Spencer, where can we find your work this week?
Yeah, have you noticed the trend of that Nick only comes on the show when there's a top 40 market? Like,
That's right.
I hear the work answer, Nick, but we know that the top 40 market is back, and that's your bread and butter. So you can find me on Twitter at Toff Sports. You can get any of my in-tournament bets over at Action Network, and you can get my model at Rotoballer.
Question before we end. You guys, I told you to remind me, you did not, so shame on you. Luke Clanton, the Florida State AM, is steaming the betting market, or is that the betting market saying they just don't know and they don't want the risk, so they're just going to price him out? This swing looks beautiful, and he is lighting up the NCAA tour. So it's kind of like, I don't want to say he's Ludwig Jr., but good God. Like I saw top 40s like even money on him. So I don't know how to take that. I personally took it as like they just don't want the risk, don't want to mess with it. But I don't know. If you're a bookmaker, in my opinion, you should take risk and get enticing action on hot name players that probably will not make the cut at a PGA Tour event.
He is he is a favorite in every matchup other than Matt Wallace.
And the fact that there's matchups, right? Like,
and he's a favorite against golfers that I think we
Mac
like.
Meisner.
Meisner being the number one example there. I like Meisner this week also. Like I didn't really give my 2 cents on him, but that's a golfer that I also like. So to be a favorite against him, my model was a little bit higher on Davis Riley than I think public consensus is going to be. So like I even thought that one was interesting. And you look at him against Wallace, I want to say it's at a book out there. You can correct me, Nick, if you have it up in front of you. Like
I got it. Yeah.
Minus 125, minus whatever it was on the other end.
Yeah. I got Luke at minus 103, Matt Wallace 125 there.
Yeah. So like that's a really credible opponent where he's holding his own.
And Wallace is respected too. So
very respected.
I don't get it. Maybe this kid's awesome. All right.
It's always interesting. It's always very interesting. And I'm happy you brought that up, Nick. I don't have enough data to give an answer on this, but for a market to respect him as much as it is, I think there's a reason to at least take it as a considerable note, and then you can make a decision based off of that. But I would not be eliminating him from a player pool without doing your due diligence and your research with it.
Yeah, I'm seeing like 8% ownership too. And
it's wild how popular he is on top of it.
What the hell? Yeah, I think on principle I'm out, but
probably the same.
Man.
Also, there's a 15-year-old in the field this week, Russell.
Yeah, Miles.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. That'll be fun to watch. There was a awesome Monday qualifier moment yesterday where gentleman Nick Beans, who I hope I pronounced that right, he qualified on the Monday qualifier, was part of a 5-for-4 playoff, got through, was in the clubhouse before the playoff actually, and down 3 beers because he was so nervous, and just enough to take the edge off. And I'm sure he had a few more beers after the round as well. After that story went viral, Kevin Kisner said, pair him with me. Unfortunately, we didn't get the pairing. I think there's a general procedure where players who don't have status get put at the beginning or the end of the day on Thursday, Friday. And so that's just how it works. But that would have been awesome had they amended that and put him with Kevin Kisner. But I'll be rooting for Nick Beans, who is a Golf Galaxy employee when he's not playing golf. And normally he travels with 8 days worth of clothes to whatever pre-qualifier he's going to. And obviously got through the pre-qualifier, got through the Monday qualifier, didn't bring clothes for this week. So he's got to figure that out. But best of luck to him. Hopefully he makes the cut. And one suggestion I have for every event on the PGA Tour, would love to see a Monday qualifier open to anybody. Let the live guys back in. Let 10 guys in on a Monday qualifier. Obviously, there have to be more pre-qualifiers, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it would be fun if you got a Monday event every week, get them into the signature events where this guy gets a payday, where now he's still got a battle to get a payday the next few days. Would love to see that if they're going to keep the signature event model somewhat similar to what it is and let some hot guys in and televise it on Monday. Nobody's watching anything on Mondays outside of WNBA, maybe the rest of the season because college baseball's over.
I saw people Venmoing that Beans. You guys can fact check me on this. I don't know this to be 100% real, but like the amount of money that I saw going to him with people sending him like $500 here and there, he maybe has made more money this year than Jordan Spieth. He was rolling in the dough yesterday.
Good for him. Well, I think we'll all be rooting for him. It should be an awesome week. Of course, you can tune in on PGA Tour Live. I will be the relief host on the main feed this week. First time this year on the main feed. So very excited for that, to be on the big show, also be in relief on the marquee group coverage. So whoever the big names we choose to follow, likely some combination of Tom Kim, Cameron Young, Minwoo Lee, I would assume is going to be on that stream. Hasn't come out yet, so don't hold me to it. But very excited for this tournament. It's wide open, fun betting board, and it should be a blast to cover it. Lots of birdies in the makings this week. Just wanted to share a reminder that this podcast is presented by Bet365. Bet365 doesn't do ordinary. That's why you get more boosts with them than with anyone else. Every day, they power up the odds on hundreds of bets to give you a chance to win more. Bet365 boosts specific markets, your winnings, and even parlays, and they don't stop there. Keep an eye out for their biggest and best odds with the incredible Super Boost. Check out the boosts and see why it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 or older and present in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, North Carolina, New Jersey, Ohio, Virginia, or 18 older in Kentucky. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. Terms, conditions, and restrictions apply. Gentlemen, fun show. Thanks for making the time this week. It was a blast, and we'll see you guys next week for the John Deere Classic, where there will be a top 40 market, and who knows, maybe there'll be a wild hammer kid running around. But until then, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.